Welcome to another edition of Journey of Hope. Stories of people from around the world that have been impacted by the healing ministry of Loma Medical Center. Our special guest today is an amazing individual. Some have called him a globe-traveling diplomat. He has been around the world representing the United States and the United Nations. He's the highest-ranking American at the United Nations. Ambassador Joseph Reed. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you, Dr.
Ambassador
Martell.
Reed. It is good to have you here on this program. And there are people from around the world that are going to be watching this interview. And you're an individual that has been a friend of mine for a number of years,
Yes.
and a friend of Loma University Medical Center.
Absolutely.
I want to learn a little bit about your background. We're going to share about your background and then about your experience in cancer and your relationship with the medical center here. But why don't you tell us where it all started, where you're from, and a little bit about your dad and about this exciting work that you've been involved in at the United Nations.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Martell. It's a great honor for me to be on this program with you. And I am an ambassador of Loma Linda Medical Center.
I know you are. A number of patients have come here because of your influence.
Absolutely. And I myself am a cancer survivor, having taken the proton therapy treatment 18 years ago.
It's been 18 years.
At the introduction of Elder Wilson.
Yes, you're a friend of Elder Neil Wilson, who is the former General Conference president.
Correct, and a great, 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 great man, and also a great friend. And it was he who introduced me to Dr. James Slater.
Okay.
And it was 18 years ago, and I came to tour the Proton Center, and 18 minutes after I was in the building, I turned to Dr. Slater and said, "When can I sign up? When can you sign up?"
You are all ready to start. Well, why don't we start back? Tell us where you were raised and a little bit about your journey into the work that you've been involved in for so many years.
Well, I was born in New York City and raised in Connecticut, in a town nearby New York, and then went to boarding school, high school in Western Massachusetts in a school called Deerfield Academy, and then went to Yale University.
So you went to Yale.
And graduated from Yale and went to work at the World Bank.
Okay.
And then from the World Bank, I was the private secretary to the then president of the bank, Eugene Black, who was a great American. And he retired from the World Bank and went back to his original place of work, which was the Chase Manhattan Bank, and was a key advisor to David Rockefeller.
Oh, was he really?
Absolutely, key advisor and a key director of the bank. And he and I worked with him and for him. And then when he retired from the bank, he recommended to Mr. Rockefeller that I join his staff, and I became chief of staff to David Rockefeller for 12 years.
For 12 years. Well, nobody just happens to become involved in relationships like this. Who was your father?
My father was Joseph Verner Reed Sr., and he was originally from Denver, Colorado, and moved east and married my mother in 1929. And he was a wonderful, wonderful man, and I think about him every day. And he was a philanthropist and also a developer of real estate in Florida. And
in fact, there's one whole area that was an island.
Yes, an island.
An island that he was really responsible for developing.
He developed an entity called Hobe Sound.
Hobe Sound.
Hobe, H-O-B-E Sound.
Okay, Hobe Sound.
Which is now Jupiter, and the island was Jupiter Island.
Oh my!
And he developed that, and there's a club called the Jupiter Island Club, which now has an 18-hole golf course. When he acquired it, it had 6 holes sand.
Really?
So it's really been developed, and then I became chief of staff in Mr. Rockefeller's office. And I'm one of the few people that don't call him David. I still call him Mr. Rockefeller.
Well, I think that has to. I want to share something here. I pulled some things off of the internet and then made contact with a very close friend of yours and had some things sent out to me. And I want to share what this particular writer has written. Few Americans are born with a silver spoon of such antiquity in their mouths as Ambassador Joseph Verner Reed. In a country as young as America, those who descend from the first pilgrim settlers who came to Plymouth by England's Mayflower, now called the Mayflower Society, are as close to aristocracy as they come. Yet, while the citizens of the American democracy respect such lineage, their admiration is harder to come by. In the face of a so-called aristocrat, the average hard-boiled American will turn a cool eye and ask, yes, but what do you do? Ambassador Reed, not content to rest on the distinguished laurels of his birth, has spent his life forging ahead, taking on several great hats. So apparently you come from a lineage, and your father was kind of the beginning. And, you know, people don't just become diplomats and ambassadors. And apparently you started there, and you began working with Rockefeller.
Rockefeller.
And what was your role there?
Well, I was the chief of staff to Mr. Rockefeller.
Okay.
And the bank was a huge, huge operation, and is now, of course, changed and is entirely different. But then after 12 years of being associated in the bank, President Reagan tapped me to become ambassador to the Kingdom of Morocco, where I served for 4 years. And then President Reagan summoned me back from the Kingdom of Morocco and appointed me as the deputy permanent representative to the United Nations under the late General Walters.
Okay.
And I served with General Walters, who was an extraordinary figure. He spoke 14 languages.
Wow.
And he succeeded Jeane Kirkpatrick in the role of permanent representative. And then President Reagan asked me to cross First Avenue and to become Undersecretary General for Political and General Assembly Affairs. And so then I did that, and I have been appointed and reappointed by 4 Secretary Generals.
And you just had another reappointment here in the last in the last few weeks,
Yes,
really.
that's correct.
Yeah, so
That's
what
correct.
an honor
Yes.
and a recognition of your outstanding leadership abilities.
Thank you. I started with Pérez de Cuellar from Peru, and then he was succeeded by Boutros Ghali from Egypt, who was also a friend. And then my colleague, Kofi Annan from Ghana, he was elevated to Secretary General, and he appointed me to the Staff Management Consultative Committee, which is the highest ranking committee in the United Nations, where I served for 12 years.
Really? 12 years.
12
well,
years.
now, if I understand...
And then, Dr. Martell, excuse me for interrupting, but then Ban Ki-moon from Korea, he came on as the current Secretary General, and he immediately reappointed me and then reappointed me just now.
Just in the last couple of weeks, I know. Yeah, you know, this
is 4 Secretary Generals, all different, all friends, and all have been superstars.
Well, I saw one, well, a number of different articles, and one was calling you a globe-trotting diplomat because I saw in one of the articles the horrendous schedule that you've had in traveling around, all around the world and carrying on all these different reasons.
Well, I had the privilege of being chief of protocol of the White House and being on loan from the United Nations, by the United Nations to the United States under George Bush Sr. Mm-hmm. And in that capacity as chief of protocol, I accompanied the president to 33 countries.
33
countries.
I can only imagine what your passport or passports, you've gone through a few passports.
Yes.
They've been stamped so many different times. And how long were you chief of protocol?
3 years.
For 3 years.
Yes, and it was a very exciting time. And we had the visit of Queen Elizabeth on a state visit, and then we had General Secretary Gorbachev, and we had. The United States is unique in the fact that it has a state visit a state visit, which is a very complicated piece of business, very complicated with the moving parts. The United States hosts a state visit every month except for August. And you compare that with Great Britain, for instance, and they have 2 state visits a year.
Wow, a big, big difference. Well, one of the articles I saw here was talking about your work, and we're going to look at a couple of slides here in just a moment. This particular article talks about Ambassador Reed received his training for the world of globetrotting diplomacy the old-fashioned way, born into it. And it talks about your father and about your mother here. It says that they saw to it that their children were exposed to the world from a very young age. Ambassador Reed's father is also credited with creating the exclusive enclave, the Hobie Sound, in Florida. Then it talks about, after graduation, going on to Deerfield. And one of the articles here talked about you're inviting, apparently, all of the people there in the D.C. area to a particular dinner. I mean, something that they credit you for. Let's take a look at a couple of the pictures, and you tell us what they are.
All right.
So,
oh my goodness.
This one is.
This is. That's interesting that the white flag, you'll see the United Nations flag, the blue flag, and then the white flag is reserved for those who are ambassadors of the United States of America to the United Nations, with the white field for peace.
Okay, and it looks like you've got some heavy badges on there, enough to throw somebody's back out. Let's take a look at another picture here.
That's a picture taken on a visit with President Bush to the Kremlin, and there we are, right at the foot of the Kremlin. Right in front of the Kremlin
there.
And there it was also with President Bush. My goodness, look at that. It was at the Great Wall, and it was freezing cold. Freezing cold.
Well, you got a nice top hat there to help out.
And there it is, my Lord, I look so young there. That's with President Reagan in the Oval Office on a visit that he had extended to the late King of Morocco, King Hassan.
Okay.
And that was in the Oval Office. And there...
We got, I think we have one more. I can't pull that one up, but it was...
It was at the General Assembly.
Yeah.
At the Parliament of Man.
Let me see. We're going to quickly pick it up.
There we are.
That's the one I wanted.
Well, when the United Nations was founded in 1945 in San Francisco, there were 52 countries. Today, there are 192 countries. And when I first started as Under Secretary General, there were 154 countries.
154.
So now there are 192.
There was something very special about that symbol and the logo. Did you want to comment on that?
The logo, which is on the Great Wall behind my head there, that is the official symbol of the United Nations, which was created in San Francisco at the founding. And the marketing people tell us that this symbol of the United Nations, the symbol of peace, is the most recognized symbol in the world. So because it's in every town, village, hamlet.
Apparently all over the world.
That's what the work of the United Nations is.
Well, you have traveled around the world. You've rubbed shoulders with some of the most important people in the world. And yet, being in a position of high influence and leadership, you still were confronted with the sobering reality that you had cancer.
That's right.
And this happened about 18 years ago, and you ended up coming to Loma, Linda. And as a result of, and we'll talk about that, but as a result of your treatment here, you've become a friend of the institution and really
strong supporter.
And a strong supporter and an ambassador for Loma Linda University Medical Center.
Have the highest regard for Dr. Slater, who I think, personally, should have been awarded the Nobel Prize for Medicine, and perhaps he will be.
Well, I know there's a number of us that feel the same way, and we just need to have the right people in the right position to be able to affect that. But tell us, what happened when you were confronted with the words that you have cancer, and you had cancer in the family, and I know that your wife has been affected by that.
And she's being treated as we speak for cancer of the lungs, and very successfully so, with Dr. Bush in charge of the team that's taking care of her. And I should tell you that Friday the 13th, which is tomorrow, Friday the 13th, 18 years ago, three things happened to me. One, I lost my father's hat in a New York City taxi cab. Two, the United States of America vetoed the candidacy of my friend, Secretary General Dr. Boutros Ghali, for a second term. And 4 o'clock in the afternoon, my general medicine doctor called me and said I had prostate cancer.
So you know that it's a historic date for
Friday
many,
the 13th is really quite a remarkable day.
All right. Well, now, how did you feel? I mean, what kind of an impact did it make upon you when you had cancer?
Well, I was so lucky. I had gone and made investigations at various hospitals and didn't like what I found, which was the golden rule was to put you on the operating table and to cut you open and to take out your prostate. Well, I didn't like that. And so by chance, by absolute, the Lord had a hand in this, that he had Elder Wilson come to call on me at the United Nations. And Elder Wilson and I had luncheon, and we discussed how he had prostate cancer and how he had taken the initiative with Dr. Slater to the creation of the Proton Therapy Center. And I was sold.
Well, as you know, this is a religious institution,
Right.
and we have thousands upon thousands of people that are diagnosed with different types of cancer, and only a few come to Loma Linda. And we don't believe that anybody comes here by accident. And people come here to be treated for the cancer, but there are many, many things that they undergo while they're here. The undergirding philosophy of Loma Linda is to make man whole,
Exactly.
mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I know because of the experience you've had, you know, we made you an honorary member of the first Proton Advisory Committee, and you still are on that committee, and it's lending a lot of influence to people really around the world and raising funds for research, and you've been an integral part of that. But I want to come back to when you had cancer. What kind of an impact did this make? How did it affect you, and how is it different for you today now that you once had cancer?
I'm a cancer survivor.
You're a cancer
And
survivor.
I'm very grateful for everything and everybody here at Loma Linda did for me. I think it's a fair statement to say that when one is pronounced with cancer, it's a life-changing experience. It is a shock to the mind, it's a shock to the body, and it's a shock to the spirit. And all of that was healed here at Loma Linda. And I shall always be grateful, as my wife is grateful, because she was treated 5 years ago for lung cancer, which has reappeared, and she's under treatment now. And I don't think that there's a stronger ambassadress for Loma Linda than my wife Mimi of 49 years.
And I know you celebrated your 49th anniversary, and you're right, she's got a remarkable spirit
Absolutely.
and positive outlook, and undergoing the treatment and doing extremely well.
Exactly.
And I know that you know, God is He's the one that
That's right.
starts and continues and completes the healing, and I know that things are going to go well. And you've had contact with a lot of different people that all of a sudden find out that they've got cancer, and I know that many, many of the patients in the past that you've had contact with have ended up coming here, and you've shared the experience
Well, Dr.
with them.
Martell, I have to say this to you, that if I get a message on my answering machine, either at the office or at home, with someone who has heard about Loma Linda, that is the first phone call that I return, absolute first phone call. And now we have our great friend Robert Marchini and his extraordinary book entitled How to Survive Prostate Cancer, which is now a bestseller.
Yes.
And he's a remarkable supporter with an organization that has 3,000
Yeah,
supporters.
3,500 members.
3,500.
Right. And they call that the Bob.
That's right.
For the Brotherhood of the Balloon. And yeah, it's become an international
Yes.
support group for prostate cancer. And really, I think...
And his book is a bestseller.
and it's a bestseller, and I think it's going to end up being translated into a couple of other languages.
Sure.
And yeah, it's been a tremendous source of help to people that have been identified.
Well, he's a remarkable figure.
Oh, he really is,
Absolutely.
and making a tremendous impact. I think there are all 50 members of his organization that from all 50 states and 26 different countries now, really around the world. It's an international support group, and
Right.
Bob has really made it just a very, very positive impact. Let me share something here. It talks about Morocco was your first official brush with the diplomacy when you were important.
And Morocco, it's interesting to note, Morocco was the first country on earth to recognize our infant republic.
First one, really?
This makes the French and the Dutch quite angry, but this was discovered maybe 20 years ago, 20 years ago, by a researcher from Casablanca in our national archives. And they unearthed an exchange of letters between George Washington and the Sultan of Morocco.
Really?
Yes. And the Sultan recognizes and gives right of transport and right of entry into Tangier and into Casablanca. And Thomas Jefferson, the then Secretary of State, wrote the King of Morocco, the Sultan of Morocco, and said, quote, "Thank you for recognizing our infant republic. We are very grateful. We are a young nation, and we are poor, and our prospects are not that good."
Oh my! You go back. You go back to the beginning of time.
And this exchange between George Washington and the Sultan of Morocco is in English and in Arabic, and is the size of that screen behind us, and is placed in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
Really?
Yes.
Really? This article goes on to talk about you and your record. It says his record shows that his time there was extremely successful. He and King Hassan began a close relationship that lasts to this day. And it's talking about you. He's also presided over the modernization of the Voice of America office in Tangiers, which was crucial back in the days of the Cold War for transmission to the Soviet Union.
Right. Right.
So, I mean, you have...
Well, the reason it was in Tangier is as a curvature of the Earth, but it made the station waves able to go all the way into the Kremlin.
Really?
Yes, yes.
Well, one of those pictures showed a lot of medals, and this article says, one could say that to know Joseph Reed is to know his medals. They are like his exquisitely tailored suits, often regarded by those who don't know any better as evidence of a less than serious attitude towards his work. Nothing could be further from the truth. Quote, "Decorations awarded from a sovereign state are not a light and funny business."
That's true. That's true.
So, and you had all these medals were indicative of what?
Well, that I had given support to that particular nation, and they took in turn to recognize me with the bestowing of the medal. And the picture that you showed there of me with the medals, the most prominent one was from Chile, which is one of the hemisphere's oldest awards. And then the late Pope. There we are. There's the one that's around my neck. Is from His Holiness Pope John, which is the Order of Pius IX, and I wear that. And there's the sash with the medal, which is from Chile, as I said to you, and then the others are from Korea, the Cameroons. And I can't see the other one. I can't remember which one.
You've got so many on there. It's absolute. Well, you know, in spite of all the places you have traveled in the world and representing the United Nations and America, I am glad that you're a traveling ambassador for Loma Linda.
It's a great pleasure for me, and an honor and a privilege to be an ambassador of Loma Linda.
Well,
a great institution.
We are just thrilled, and we know that things are going to go well for Mimi. And at another time, you know, we'll end up having her come on the program and hear her story. When you encounter other people that have cancer, or people that are looking on right now that have just discovered that they've got cancer, What can you tell them as a survivor? What kind of word of caution or word of encouragement would you give to them? It doesn't matter whether it's prostate cancer or some other type of cancer. When people are diagnosed, I often tell people the good news is you were diagnosed.
That's right.
Because you can't do anything about it until you know the diagnosis, and then you can move ahead and begin making things.
Begin treatment.
Yeah, in treatment. What would you tell patients or people that have just been diagnosed? What would you tell them? As a word of encouragement?
First, I would say, get a hold of Loma Linda
Right.
and see whether you can get on the list to be treated at this great institution. And then the second thing I would say to them is remain calm. Just the pronouncement that you have cancer is a shattering experience. And it's very, very, very important for the healing process is to remain calm and positive and to have faith in the Lord that He will be taken care of both medically and spiritually.
That's wonderful counsel, because being diagnosed is generally not a death sentence.
Correct.
You're diagnosed, then you need to find out what are the best ways to go ahead and proceed and undergo the treatment. There's an Old Testament writer that says, "Today is the day of the Lord. Let us be glad and rejoice in it." And I tell people, you know, we have one day at a time. We never have yesterday. We don't have tomorrow. It's only today. And we need to learn to live each day to the fullest. Ambassador Reed, it's so good to have you on our program.
Oh, it's a
People from
privilege.
around the world are watching, and I am so thankful that you are an ambassador, not only for the United Nations, but for Loma Linda
Absolutely.
University Medical Center.
Absolutely.
It is so good to have you here on the program.
Dr. Martell, thank you. You do a wonderful job.
Well-
You do a spectacular job.
Well, thank you. It's my joy to work with our patients and work here with Loma Linda Medical Center. For those that are watching on, I'm Lynn Martell with LLBN and with Loma Linda Medical Center. And I want to tell you that God has a plan for your life. If you give an opportunity, trust in Him. Thank you. We'll see you next week on Journey of Hope. God bless you.